Are you ready for the talk of your life? Talk of the town?
Me?
You, the people, all the above. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about today? One guess, two guesses.
Selfishness, selflessness.
You've got it. Selflessness. You wouldn't say I'm a selfless person? I do good deeds. Good deed a day. Good deed a day, dude. That's me.
Is anything truly selfless? It's always for one's own satisfaction, right?
In order to understand selflessness, you need to understand the self. The self is who we think we are and who we want others to think we are. It's who we think we are and who we want others to think we are. And we project this out into the world. It can be really overt by just telling people, I'm this is what I affiliate with, this is who I am, and wearing certain kinds of clothing or things that actually literally say what you are on your clothing. And then there's the more common, subtle ways, finding ways in conversations to drop little hints about who you are in the world.
What'd you have for lunch today? Well, I had rice and beans, avocado. I made it a little early because I get up early in the morning to practice.
That kind of thing. I will find all sorts of ways to drop that little piece of information in. That's who I want people to believe I am.
Mr. Spiritual.
The self also filters what it takes in, because what we take in, we want it to match what our projected self is. We don't want there to be any conflict between who we think we are and what we take in. We want what we take in to reinforce that projection. That all making sense?
I wasn't really listening.
All right, cool. This, of course, doesn't mean that it's always positive what we take in. So if our sense of self is fairly negative, we will let in only things that reinforce that negative sense of self. And if our sense of self is positive, then we will only let in things that reinforce our positive sense of self. That is the self. The self is a veil. It projects out and it filters what comes in. Over time, we do this day in, day out, minute after minute, which is typically the case. We believe in that projection. And the more we believe in that projection, the more we solidify that projection. My projected self engages only with your projected self. We remain in this kind of surface area where it's all just two people trying to convince the other person that they exist in the world and that they're never going to die. And that's worst case scenario.
I'm trying to think about people who are not doing that.
Right on cue, because now we're going to take a turn and we're going to go towards selflessness. If the self is all that projection, if that's the self, then what is a selfless person? Well, a truly selfless person has none of that. Literally zero. Those people almost entirely do not exist. Like a mad mystic, right? The mad mystic, they don't fit into society. That's why they're always on the outside of society, because they don't have a self in place that allows them to engage with the world. You see this with like Ramakrishna or shamans or something like that. Like shamans are known for being on the outskirts of town. That's why it's always very funny when people are like online being like, in their bio, they have shaman. No, dude, you have an apartment. You are like a functioning human being. Shamans typically are not functioning in the world at the level that you are. There are a handful that can do it, but that's only because they are so crazy. It just reinforces how far out they really are. This other idea of selflessness has to do with attachment to self. So selfless doesn't necessarily have to mean without self. It can also mean with less attachment to self. These are people, when you're with them, you actually feel their humanness. And I don't mean that in like it's like a special occasion. I mean, this is like your friends. When you hang out with your friends, yourself tends to drop away because you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to project anything out to your friends. If you feel like you have to constantly tell someone who you are through the dress you wear or through the things you say or through all this other kind of these identifiers, then you're probably actually not very good friends with that person. And I would say the same thing. Relationship advice over here coming at you hot. If you're in a relationship with someone, a romantic relationship with someone, and you feel like you are constantly having to like project yourself into the room so that they get you, you got to look at that. Those are the times when you should be able to be selfless or less attached to your projected self. Karma yoga is something that people believe when they are engaging in a selfless act, and it's, I would say, 99.99999 infinity% of the time not a selfless act whatsoever because they're getting free yoga classes for it. So that shit ain't selfless and it ain't karma yoga. Mon frères, which is fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with doing trades and bartering. Bartering is a great system. It's one of the original systems. Bushel of corn, bushel of beans. Bushel of beans, bushel of yoga classes. So this idea of selfless as it relates to being less attached to the projected self is literally the definition of be in the world but not of the world. Okay? You're in the world, which means yourself is participating in the world. You project it out in order to do things, in order to get a job, in order to advance in some way, whatever the case may be. But you're not attached, you're not suctioned to that self. When we tell someone to give it a rest, what do we tend to be telling someone? I can think of that scenario right now in my head. When I say give it a rest to someone, I'm telling them to like chill out with projecting that self. You know what I mean? Like you're on 11 right now, right? And we know it. You're here, you're alive, you exist. I know that you exist. You can give it a rest now. We're all just hanging out trying to order a pizza. When you become comfortable enough in yourself, you actually get to a point where your foundation is selflessness. And that's where you exist 9 times out of 10. But that 1/10 of the time is when you need to flex, so to speak, that self. You say, okay, I'm going to do this. I need these people to know who I am, right? I've got it all written out in my head. It's all bullet pointed in my head. And I need to like let these people know who I am and who they're dealing with. That's an amazing place to be, is when you can recognize that your base is selflessness, right? So your heart is visible, your spirit is visible, your humor is visible. That's your base. And then there are these moments when you go into the world where you say, no, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I'm about. The people respond, and then you're allowed to relax and come back into your selflessness. That's a really nice place to be. When you say it's a nice place to be, you're not listening. You're still not listening. Would you say I'm a selfless person?